Another episode of Inside Virginia Tech Wrestling. Jason Bryant here with you as we are in the summertime, the off season, whatever you want to call it. Although, as my wife and many wrestling wives and coaches around the country will attest to, there is no off season in wrestling. But for this guy, there's no off season either, as he's jumping into the world of Fanco Wrestling. But he has been a proud Hokie and's got 2 classes to finish up before he can put that big degree from Blacksburg on his wall. Jake Hart. Jake, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you having me on.
So, one of the reasons we're talking to Jake today, folks, and if you are actually physically watching this is the first time I've done video for this show, since Jake is doing a lot of video with Fanco Wrestling. And again, we'll talk about what he's doing with Josiah and Fanco down there with those awesome interviews and doing some video stuff kind of like this. But Coach Roby's typically taking a lot of his calls in the car and on recruiting trips and traveling stuff. So it's not like he's going to be up there with his phone in front of him, like doing a FaceTime thing. So basically, that's why Hokie Nation has been missing out on the video element of this show. But if you are listening, thanks for listening. If you're watching for the first time, whether it be on Mad Talk Online or on Rockfin or on Patreon, thank you. But Jake, you've had a pretty interesting life. You've gone from Texas to South Carolina, finishing up your classes in Blacksburg, trying to get your summer work figured out. But first things first, let's do the old origin question that everybody likes to do. How did you get your start in the sport of wrestling?
Well, my dad wrestled throughout his entire life in Pennsylvania and ended up wrestling at Duke in college. My dad ended up moving down to Texas for work, and I ended up coming along, and he really got me into the sport. He was my coach growing up, all the way through until high school. That's when he kind of like let the reins off a little bit, let my other coaches take over. But my entire career basically is thanks to him. So.
Yeah, and growing up wrestling in Texas, and when I got into wrestling and I started going to Fargo, Texas had some wrestling. They had just gotten the high school sanctioning. I mean, it'd been around for a long time, but the UIL didn't sanction it until like the mid to late '90s is when we finally saw an official sanctioned high school state tournament in Texas for both boys and girls. So, for I guess the origin stories of how do you get you get your dad? How did your dad find some wrestling partners and such when wrestling was still kind of growing when you started wrestling down there?
Actually, Texas wrestling, a big reason that it grew was because you got guys, like really good guys that ended up moving down to the Dallas-Fort Worth area, which is where I'm from. Like Kenny Monday was down here, Jamil Kelly, like they were running a club. There's a bunch of guys like OU alumni. It's not that far away. They end up coming down here running clubs, stuff like that. So all these big wrestling guys, Texas is a great state and a great state for work. So they end up coming down here for work, and it just kind of works out for the state and for wrestling in general, being able to help it grow in this state. So I don't know. Texas wrestling hasn't necessarily had the most stellar reputation, but it's definitely on the come up. There's a lot of good guys that are coming out of here now, a lot of good young guys. And we're starting to see some more success on the college level as well.
Yeah, some of the names people might have known about, were coming through with guys at the Dallas Dynamite. Of course, I've had Dave
Hmm.
Keldergaard on the show, who was down there. Brandon Slay, of course, you mentioned Jamil and Kenny. Of course, a lot of people remember guys like the Ashmores, Johnny Cap. Those,
Hmm.
the Bishop Lynch kids that came through. But there's a lot more than that. Of course, one of our most recent Olympic champions, Tamira Mensah-Stock, wrestled in
Exactly.
Texas too on the women's side. So, and
Yeah,
actually,
she's
her
not
high
too far
school
away from me.
coach or her college coach actually coached Brandon Slay in high school. So like Johnny Cobb, who's a national treasure, by the way, is like had the interesting dynamic as a Texan to coach Olympic champions on the men's and women's
Hmm.
side. But the opportunity to, yeah, I don't know if it's opportunity, your dad's opportunity that took you across the country. You end up wrestling 2 years of high school in Texas. Then you end up in the wrestling juggernaut that is South Carolina. So talk about maybe the and I use that with air quotes and a smile on my face. I know there's some good
Yeah.
wrestling down there, and SC Matt has been one of my resources for years when it comes to South Carolina information. But talk about the adjustment going from Texas, which has kind of been an under the radar state, to South Carolina, which has also been an under the radar state.
South Carolina wrestling, it's just there's not me personally, I don't think there's enough support backing it. There's a lot of kids there that could do some great things, but South Carolina High School Association, all that stuff, there's not a lot of support for it. Like the state tournament's only 8 kids. And I don't know, there's not enough emphasis on wrestling in that state, which is the issue for a lot of states across the country, why wrestling isn't growing the way that it should be. The main reason that I was able to get better in South Carolina was because I had really great coaches because I was just south of Charlotte. So I went to a club in called Dark Horse, which is in Charlotte. And my high school coach as well, he paid the entire team fee just to send me alone to Beast of the East, which is where I ended up that's where I finally got noticed by college coaches. Um, and the main thing that South Carolina wrestling gave me personally was a lot of coaches that genuinely cared about me and wanted to see me succeed. So that's something that area, North and South Carolina, both are doing a great job. There's a lot of coaches there that are trying to grow the sport and they're going in the right direction, but the financial backing, the financial backing for it just isn't there yet. But hopefully in the future, it'll kind of pick up.
Yeah, we've had some teams from South Carolina come up with the Virginia duels in the past. Lexington, for example, is a team. Always they travel super well. Really
Mm-hmm.
big fan base down. Then of course Rock Hill, right near
Mm-hmm.
where you were at. They
That
came to
was
the
my
Deep
high
Creek
school
tournament.
rival.
High school, right? Yeah, they've actually
Yeah,
had the I believe they had the first Greco-Roman junior national champion in state history, a guy named Terrence Thompson at 98 pounds, way back in the day. This is
way
we're
back. I
talking the
didn't
late
know that.
90s here. They had and they had a heavyweight. Actually, him and his teammate Ryan Adams was a heavyweight at University of North Carolina for a while. So there's some ACC ties there. With you've got the Carolina reference. Your dad wrestling at Duke. Now you going to Virginia Tech. Now the opportunity to wrestle at Virginia Tech. How does that situation present itself? You talked about the Beast. And I look at guys like going to the Beast and breaking out. Kyle Rochelle is one that I remember actually doing a little. I met him at the Beast when he was a senior 112 pounder out of Kentucky and ends up wrestling in the Big Ten. Here you are out of South Carolina going to wrestle in the ACC, which ain't pardon the pun, isn't your dad's ACC. So, a lot tougher to get noticed and such. So, opportunity to go to Blacksburg. Explain how that happened.
So yeah, like you said, I went to Beast of the East and I ended up getting third there, had a pretty good tournament. And after that tournament, that's when Jared Frayer contacted me on Twitter, asked me to come out for a visit, and I went to Blacksburg. Ended up my host was Joey Prada, and I loved it there. I love the family dynamic. I love Blacksburg as a whole. Like the town is great, and the coaching staff as everybody knows, is great. And it just seemed like the best opportunity for me. And I've always wanted to wrestle college since I was like a little kid. So having the opportunity to wrestle for a top 10 program, like how I can't pass that up. So I'm very grateful for the opportunity to wrestle for Virginia Tech.
So coming from the Dallas Fort Worth metro area, and then the Charlotte. I mean, granted, South Carolina, you're in the basically a suburb of Charlotte, so you've got two major metropolitan areas that you've lived in and grown up in. Then you go to a college town that is a major city when school is in session. What's it like living in Blacksburg compared to living in Dallas Fort Worth or the Charlotte area?
So I actually had a little bit of adjustment whenever I went to Fort Mill in South Carolina. It's kind of similar to Blacksburg a little bit, like smaller town, but really congested, like you said, like major city kind of stuff in Blacksburg during the school year. So I was used to it a little bit. Um, the real thing that I had to adjust to was like summers in Blacksburg because it's a ghost town. Like Montgomery County is nothing. All right. Like Virginia Tech is the reason that Montgomery County is on the map. And I mean, I love being there. It's really peaceful, and I prefer summer in Blacksburg versus school year in Blacksburg any day of the week. And if you ask anybody that goes to Virginia Tech, they'd say the same thing. Blacksburg's just beautiful, and the people there are really just great people. And it wasn't too much of an adjustment for me since I did live in a smaller town for a couple years, so it wasn't too crazy for me.
Now you talked about the opportunity to wrestle at a Division One school, and then when you get in the room, first of all, what are the expectations going in? I mean, the goals. Everybody has big, lofty goals. Like I'm going to wrestle D1. I want to win a national championship. What were your goals coming in that first week on campus your freshman year?
I'll be honest, coming out of high school, and I feel like a lot of kids that are, pretty good in high school had the same mindset. I had a little bit of a big head, probably. And, first week in the college room, it's a major, major adjustment. You're going from being the big fish in a small pond to your high school room to, wrestling grown men and, just getting your face shoved in the mat and, you questioning, oh, am I even good at wrestling? It's a major adjustment, but that's just wrestling. You got to just keep going through it and you just got to tough it out. It really shapes you and makes you tougher, and it prepares you for the future. You're always going to run into situations in life where it may not be going as you expected it. Like when I came into college, I was like, I want to be an all-American, I want to be starting all that. Like, why would I be coming all the way halfway across the country if I'm not wanting to achieve these lofty goals? And I feel like if you don't have those lofty goals, then why are you doing it? uh and just the main thing is to keep thinking about those lofty goals, even when it isn't looking the best for you right then. You just got to keep going.
Before we started the show, we talked about, there's not a lot talked about the role players, I don't want to say bench guys because it comes off as a negative, but room guys is also comes off as a negative because everybody, every school's got them, every school needs them. I mean, you guys are the lifeblood of why your teammates get better. You take the beatings and to make sure that the guys represent the school and such. So, at what point in your college career do you go, okay? There's a reality to what I'm doing here. And, obviously you never gave up the quest. You're going to graduate in 2. You're not going to wrestle on, but you look at, okay, I'm part of this team. I mean, I guess is that a hard conversation to have with yourself when you realize you're probably not going to be the guy that gets that spot at nationals one time?
Oh, definitely. Coming to that personal realization, I didn't even come to it till my senior year after I lost my last wrestle off. Uh, I had to sit down with myself and decide, all right, is it like, why am I doing this? I had to figure out my why. Uh, Before, my why was I want to be a starter. I want to go to NCAA's, and that opportunity kind of just I didn't get it. So I had to figure out a different reason why I was wrestling. And my this past year, we had a bunch of new freshmen come in: Harrison Smith, Ty Finn, Preston Walls, Jackson Spires, Kylan Montgomery. Those are just the ones that are coming off the top of my head. There's plenty more, but they're all like 49, 65, all that range. And for me personally, uh, I put a lot of effort into just trying to help them. Like, if I can't achieve the goals that I want to, they're still fresh. Oh, sorry. Uh, so if I can't achieve the goals that I wanted to, they're still starting their college career. They have plenty of time. Uh, I can do what I can to help them progress as much as I can, like in the short amount of time that I have with them. So really just kind of putting like the rest of my team first. You know, my goals were still in the back of my mind. Like, hopefully that still comes, like that opportunity arises. But right now, like, you can't focus on that because it's just not in the cards currently. So it's just kind of being selfless a little bit,
Mhm.
just not, I know it's an individual sport, but just working with other people and trying to help them.
Because having never been in this position, but having lived with guys throughout my college career that were, never going to start, or they would spot start here and there. You had the opportunity to compete in a couple dual meets throughout the course of your collegiate career. But is there a discussion with the coaches? Obviously, there's a lot of self searching there, but is there a conversation? Sit down with like Freya or Roby or somebody, be like, to your question, you ask them, what am I doing here? I mean, how does is that something the conversation you have with the staff, or is that just more internal?
It's more internal, I'd say. I mean, like I said, it's an individual sport, and you're only going to get as much out of it as you put in. So, I mean, what's the point in me going into practice, every single day and killing myself and going through hell if I'm just going in there to mail it in?
Mhm.
I don't see any reason to do that. It seems like a waste of time. So don't the way I saw it was, I don't want this entire senior season, or the culmination of my entire career, to just be a complete waste if I'm just gonna you know be lazy like the last few months that I've been doing it. Like, I was doing it for 16 years.
Mhm.
Why would I just you know sit down the last 9 months of it?
Yeah, and one thing that also I've always been curious is, rooms are full beginning of the year, and then once the lineup's set and you get in the dual meet season, there's a lot of attrition. There's people who are like, there might be the third, fourth year guys like, I'm never gonna be. They're piecing out. Next thing you know, they're on Main Street more than they're in the wrestling room, and they're not rostered this year, and their career just kind of is there. It's HEW had enough wrestling, or it's like, all right, well, they don't even opt to look. Some people look to go Division II, Division III, find a new D1 spot with the transfer portal for those NCAA divisions. And do those thoughts cross your mind to be like, do I look for somewhere else, or was it, what, I'm in Blacksburg, I love this place?
It definitely crossed my mind. I feel like that's natural. If your career isn't going the way that you want it, you try to find another outlet where it will go the way that you want it. But I just love Blacksburg and I love the team, and I'd already committed myself. Uh, for me, I'd already committed myself to that team, that program, and I feel like I'd be doing not only myself a disservice, but my teammates a disservice if I had just, bailed. So I didn't. It crossed my mind, but I knew where I wanted to be.
And from an athlete perspective, I wasn't there in February for the Duke match, and I came in, and some of the guys that were getting ready for the stretch run, the dual meet. Okay, they're obviously, it's a match day, so they're not going to be in there scrapping. They're getting down there, getting a weight down. But what does the coaching staff do for you and your teammates who are in the same situation? Going, okay, well, we're not wrestling tonight, or we're later on in our careers, and we're here helping our team, making that team move. But what do they do for you? What's that coaching athlete situation relationship like?
Um, it's very apparent that they make it known that if you're not the guy, you need to be helping the guy who is the guy. It's like I said earlier, you have to be selfless, and they do a good job of making that team dynamic and having all the other guys that aren't the starter, aren't the guys that are going to be wrestling on castle floor, know that their efforts aren't a waste, and they're not just being abused. They have everybody on that team has a purpose, and I think that's what keeps a lot of guys there, is knowing that they have some sort of purpose, and have, like, for the younger guys, that thought in their mind, like, okay, one day I could be the guy, just keep working towards it. And then guys in my position that have been there for a while, and it's not looking like you're going to be out on the floor, on castle floor that night. Your purpose is to, you know, keep the starter ready and make sure that they're achieving the goals that they want to achieve. So the coaches do a good job of making sure that, you know, the backups and all that don't feel as if they're just like, what's called chopped liver, for
Mm.
lack of a better term.
Now, through your experiences, I'm looking through, and granted, the COVID year completely. I mean, there's no the experiences you had when you were in the starting lineup for those dual meets. They are definitely not like what we saw pre-COVID. I mean, you had the one match in the 2021 season, and then you have the Moss duel. I mean, you're
Mhm.
talking about various experiences. So, I mean, the opportunity comes up that you're going to be the guy in the lineup. But what's that moment like for I guess I don't want to say maybe the Rudy moment, but like, okay, I'm out there, I'm toiling away, and I'm getting a shot in the lineup. What's that moment like for you as an athlete?
It adds a lot more emphasis to training up until that week. Like whenever in 2021 when I wrestled that the one duel, so Caden Darber had gotten hurt a few days prior, and right before Caden Darber had gotten hurt, Coach Roby had told me to start going up to 157 because I was having a tough time making 149. And then he said, Jake, you have an opportunity to wrestle at 149 this weekend. Do you want to do it? I was like 165, and it was like less than a week before. But it's just, you have that opportunity, and I'm not going to waste it. I don't, those don't, for me, like a guy like me, like those opportunities don't come very often. And I'm not just going to say, no, I'm a little heavy right now. I can't do it. Uh, for me,
Because
it's
you
just,
won't
I'm going
get
to do
that call next time.
exactly. So I'm going to do whatever it takes to make sure that I can utilize that opportunity. So for me, it made me excited, because I mean that's what I trained for the entire year. I mean, I love my team and all that, but it's not as much fun, wrestling and practice every single day versus actually getting to compete. Wrestling and practice, it gets a little monotonous, and you start to be like, why am I even doing this? And then when you finally get to compete, like you remember why you're doing it.
Now, fast forward to actually getting some fans in the stands, this past
Mhm.
season. Uh, George Mason Mostool. I mean, unique experience. It's a cool place to. I mean, I haven't actually seen a duel there, but I just everything I've watched, it looks pretty
Mhm.
cool. And to wrestle in front of some fans. I mean, it's got to be that experience compared to the previous experience during the COVID season. What was that like?
Oh, it's super fun. It was one of the most I'll remember it forever. It didn't go the way that I wanted, but uh it's one of those things, getting to wrestle at Moss Arts Center is, one of the highlights of my wrestling career. And I mean, I'm forever grateful for it. It's being able to wrestle in front of fans is just awesome. Because I don't know, being like a backup and everything, you don't really know if anyone knows who you are. And then all of a sudden after the match, people know who you are and come up to talk to you. It makes you feel good. So I don't know. It was a lot of fun and it was a good opportunity.
So when you going back to why you came to Blacksburg, obviously there's the wrestling part of it, but you're majoring in marketing. You're starting working with FancoWrestling.com, and the career goals before you jumped onto the Fanco side and the content creation, media side. What were your goals? What are your career goals?
So actually, I think the website's not updated. I was marketing major my freshman year.
Okay,
Uh, I'm currently a sports media and analytics major with a minor
there you
in
go.
creative
That checks
writing.
more boxes.
Yeah, there you go. No, I hated marketing. I couldn't do the math. I am terrible at math. And what made me decide journalism was because I love writing and reading and all that. Uh, I've always been very English heavy. Uh, and I like telling stories. And for me, the reason I went into sports journalism specifically, is because like the only thing that I know, honestly, is wrestling. And if I could make a career out of telling stories about wrestling and promoting the sport and helping grow the sport that has given me pretty much everything, like I I don't care how much money I'm making. That just seems like the dream life for me. Uh, I don't know. What
I
was your
know I know
question
a little
again?
bit about that, so yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
one
exactly. You
thing,
would know.
one thing is the reason I bring that up is I look at we talk about the relevance of why wrestling programs matter, and it's not just the 10 guys that are out there wrestling on the men's teams, and now we're getting to over 100 women's teams, and we're going to see more Division 1 teams out there. But it's like, okay, you're in wrestling, and then you're going to be a coach, you're going to be a teacher, and it's not And I use Brent Metcalf for example for this for some reason. I don't know why, but it's like Brett Metcalf's not going to be your high school coach. Guys like Jake
Mhm,
Hart are going to be your high school coach. Guys that went through the
mhm.
room. So, having that opportunity, have you thought about getting into coaching? Obviously, I can speak clearly if I didn't do well with who I married, I could tell you what, it'd be a lot. I'd be doing a lot more shifts at as you say, Red Lobster right now, and then
Yeah.
trying to supplement my wrestling income at my age of 42. So, thoughts about potentially a career in coaching, because it's guys like you that actually and your teammates that might have seen the one match or might have never seen the match that go into teaching and coaching that end up coaching and teaching the next generation of kids who's like, all right, well, my coach went to Tech, I'm going to go to Tech. Or oh yeah, I went down, say the Ferrum kids or the Averitt kids, those are going to be places where they go. So is coaching potentially in your future as well?
Oh, I would love to coach. That I've always thought about coaching. I mean, my dad was my club coach growing up, and like just being able to work with kids and being able to help them achieve their goals seems like something that it just seems really fulfilling. I mean, I think back to all my coaches growing up that had a major part in my development, like my high school coaches, like Bill Wilson, uh, Chris Brock, my club coaches, Jared Haberman, Melvin Lofton, uh, Jimmy Avola, like so many guys that they're doing it because they love wrestling and they want to see me succeed, and that makes me as an athlete want to work even harder. So if I could play that role in some other person's life, like that would just be amazing. And if there's any coaching opportunity that arises, like I would jump on it if I could.
Now going to Fanco. Let's see. People have. I actually discovered Josiah's channel just randomly one day. I'm on YouTube and I'm like, who is Fanco Wrestling? And I see, and then I look and I was like, okay, uh, Penn State kid. Now he's at Campbell. He was doing their social media. I'm like, okay, and I'm seeing a lot of stuff, and I'm seeing a lot of things that he's doing on his own. I'm like, okay, that's sharp, that's good. Not the way I do it, but still interesting. I mean, obviously, there's 100
Mhm.
different ways to do things and
Mhm.
media and such. But I'm liking where he was going, and I looked down and all of a sudden realized this guy's got a ton of freaking subscribers. What in the world?
Yeah.
Where did he just came out of nowhere? It didn't came out of my radar. I was like, whoa! And then all of a sudden he's here. He's putting out really solid content, and then he's bringing people on. So let's take a look at. You're one of those people. So those of you on video will get to see this firsthand. Here is your shot. Here's what you've got going on. So tell us what you're doing with Fanco and how that opportunity brought itself to your doorstep.
Yeah, so I was watching Fanco Wrestling on YouTube back when he only had a couple thousand subscribers. He was still pretty new. Yeah. And
Selfie
last
humble
summer.
brag. I mean, geez, I've got four.
Yeah.
My YouTube channel's got like 400. Granted, I don't use it very much, but I mean,
Of course.
I'm yeah, as you hate math, but analytics are a thing and subscriber
Yeah,
numbers are a thing. But continue.
of course. So last summer I was coming to the end of my college career. I need to have some sort of internship, some sort of experience if I'm going to get a job after I graduate. So I was like thinking of places to do internships, and I had just randomly sent Josiah an email one day, asked him if he had any opportunities, and he emailed me back. We did an interview. It started off unpaid, just write a few articles uh, every couple weeks, and then if I was doing well and if he liked what I was producing, then it would move into freelance stuff. And then it did. I was doing some more, just article stuff. And then Josiah launched his Patreon channel. And in order to like give some, uh, what's the word I'm looking for? Um, he had me do video interviews, basically what I was doing for the articles, but just video format, just to
Mm-hmm.
give a reason to subscribe to the Patreon
Well,
channel.
bonus content.
Exactly.
Yeah, the extra. Because, like, for example,
Exactly.
like, if you're listening to this is part of the free option. Now,
Hmm.
you watching the video, you're obviously a subscriber on either my Rockfin channel or my Patreon channel. This is checks the boxes that you're talking about right now.
Exactly. So I was doing some just regular wrestling video interviews. Wasn't very good, I'll be honest. And then a few months ago, Josiah reached out to me and told me that he wanted me to brainstorm some ideas to kind of separate ourselves from other wrestling other wrestling platforms. And then I just thought of More Than the Mat, which is a podcast about wrestlers, what wrestlers do outside of the wrestling room. Um, so, their other passions, hobbies, just kind of separating them from that athlete umbrella, give them more of a you know, human look to fans and all that. So, like for example, I interviewed Kyrie from NC State, their 133 pounder who tattoos all the guys on the team. He tattoos himself. He tattoos his mom. Like I love talking to him. And then uh, I've interviewed a bunch of other guys like Tony Gravely about his MMA career. Uh,
That's a Magna
um,
Vista kid right there.
exactly. No, Tony Gravely, he used to train at Virginia Tech for a couple years, so
Mhm.
I had a little bit of an in there. He's one of my good friends, and
Do you
he
know who do you know who he beat in the state finals that has quite a Virginia Tech tie-in? I'm sure most of Hokie fans may
oh,
know this already.
Devin Carter, right?
A 91-pound Devin Carter, I believe. I don't
Yep,
even think
I
Devin was
remember
even
that.
95 pounds. Yeah, so that's
I
one of
remember.
yeah, that was one of the old in old Salem Civic Center. It's just
Mhm.
in Magna Vista. Yeah, that's the old guy that announces the Virginia single. Well, what used to be the double A and single, and
Mhm.
now there's like we're not going to get to the class discussion to get on that. But
Yeah.
anyway, you're talking to Tony, you're talking to these guys, for the podcast. So
Yeah, and honestly, I've been having so much fun with it. The main reason that wanted to Josiah reached out to me about doing the podcasting, but I was excited about it because personally, as I'm pursuing a career in journalism, I want to become a little more well-rounded.
mhm.
And I don't want to just be producing articles and all that, just like only have that on my portfolio. So Josiah's thankfully been gracious enough to give me a little more freedom with this project. So I've been doing a lot of the editing and just kind of learning how to use Adobe Creative Cloud a little bit. Like I obviously have used it in class and stuff, but not enough to the point where like I'm comfortable with it. So this opportunity is good for me I'm getting better at it. It's not professional grade or anything like that right now. But I'm getting more comfortable with it, and hopefully once this starts picking up, which it is right now, thankful we're growing a little bit of an audience. I'll be pretty good. So I'm really thankful for this opportunity just because like I'm learning so much, and I'm thankful for Josiah giving me the opportunity to do it because I'm a very hands-on learner.
Mhm.
So having the opportunity to just actually do the stuff and make the mistakes and learn from it is just I can't be more grateful.
Yeah, and that's and from my firsthand experience. The first time I ever sat down and edited a video when I came out here to Minnesota in, I don't know, 2008 to do Wrestling 411, they sat down and plopped Final Cut Pro in front of me, and I'm like, uh-oh.
Hmm.
So we talk about video editing is still one of my it's like I
It's
subscribe to
tedious.
the keep it simple stupid theory. I'm like, okay, I don't need heavy transitions, just give me cut. All right, cut. Okay, chop this out. Yep, marks, ins, outs, and shortcut keys are my favorites. Now, I've
Hmm.
gotten pretty good at Adobe Audition, obviously with podcast editing, being putting
Yeah.
over 3,000 episodes out. Audition, I'm pretty good at. I will get somebody go, hey, can you clean this up for me? I got this, because there's also other tricks out there. Now, the others InDesign, I'm rocking with that on the design
Uh-huh.
side. But yeah, Premiere on the Creative Cloud side, Premiere's I struggle with. I really don't do a whole lot with like the photography and Lightroom and things of that nature. But
Yeah.
Photoshop has been probably on my. I know just enough about Photoshop, and I've used just that much for the last 20 years to be like, that's all I need. I don't need to know all this extra stuff. Josiah has all these cool graphics. I'm like, you know what? We talked about before we started about why I use Restream from an AppSumo deal. I have this thing called Relay That. So when you see my graphics, that's from Relay That, because I don't need to do all this extra time in Photoshop, because you
Hmm.
will learn it's not just the journalism side, because we're all under this content creation window, whether you're a journalist or you're not a journalist, or whether you say you are one day, say you aren't the other. You got a lot of hands on. So that's the one thing. What's the toughest thing you've tried to encompass, or one thing you realized that was a lot more difficult than just saying, yeah, I'm in sports journalism. And then there's the stuff that's like, they didn't tell you about this in class.
Uh, Learning how to talk in front of a camera. So like obviously like More Than the Mat is very audio heavy. Like it's for free on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, but we had the video format on Patreon. And like when I'm doing like the interviews for articles and stuff, and it's just a one-on-one thing in a Zoom room, and I'm just talking to them, like it's not that difficult. We're having a conversation. But when I know people are listening and watching, uh, it adds a little more pressure for some reason. Like I don't know why for some reason, but uh, it just adds a little more pressure, and just learning to get more comfortable
Hmm.
with talking to pretty much strangers too. I mean, like I'm pretty good at talking to people. I feel like I'm pretty. I don't know what the word I'm looking for is. I'm pretty good at talking to people.
Perhaps verbose.
Yeah, sure.
That's one I use
Uh,
about myself quite a bit, because
yeah.
when you
So
get paid to talk, that's one thing, and then when you're forced to talk, it's another. Because I can sit
mhm.
there, I remember last time I was in Blacksburg, I'm sitting there talking with Ethan, and I'm just talking about wrestling, just blah 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 blah. And then when you get up there, and then like, okay, when like we start this interview, the candor before we hit okay, 3, 2, 1, go is
Mhm.
much different from when okay, the interview's over and you're just BSing around.
Yeah,
So,
you're just talking.
uh, yeah, and I'll tell you that from my experience, that's a skill that does take time, and just like wrestling, it takes reps, it takes
Mhm.
repetition. Do it again, do it again, do it again, because and I don't know anybody that's ever turned on the camera right away and been great at it.
Oh,
It takes time. It's like we always joke in the podcasting world. Your worst podcast is your first one. You will never be worse than your first podcast. Typically,
yep.
that's why we always say do 2 or 3 before you start, before you even publish them, to get the kinks out, and then go. So there's another tip for you first time podcasters out there: record a couple first, then go, or don't ever try anything like for the first time live. So those are some tips that I've learned over the years. Like, okay, we're gonna try this. No, try it, test it with somebody, then do it.
Yeah.
Because I've been playing with some other stuff with either Ecamm or OBS. I'm like, you know what? I'm not ready to put this out with a guest for the first time, and I've been too busy with wife and kids and travel to do the other thing. So
Oh
that's
yeah,
one thing too. What are
definitely.
what are your goals with the show? Because right now you've had some really, because being I've got a couple tattoos, I've got 3 rather
Mhm.
sizable ones. So the Urini show definitely was piquing my interest. Now, granted, I wasn't about to let probably he's not a rookie at doing it anymore, but like my
No.
cousin was like a tattoo artist tattooing himself, and I looked at his stuff like, ain't no way you're touching my legs with that thing. But these stories, like, one, how are you getting these stories, and what do you get to where's the fun part for you to tell these stories, and what are some things that are on your radar that maybe you've maybe seen in wrestling that you want to do your way, or something that I haven't seen this before. Let's get this out there.
So for me, I mean, me being a college athlete and, not being in the spotlight, I feel like a lot of guys that aren't in the spotlight, uh, you don't really know anything about who the wrestler is. Not
Mhm.
necessarily guys in the spotlight, just wrestlers in general. Like, you don't know who they are. You just know, oh, Hunter Boland's the 184 for Virginia Tech. Hayden Hidley, he's the 174 for NC State. Like, you just know that about them. And they're normal people. Like, they have lives outside of wrestling. Like, there is life outside of wrestling. And I
Really?
just
I
yeah, believe
was
it or
not
not.
aware of that. I was
Believe
not
it or
aware of
not.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just being able to let them tell that story and, like I said earlier, separate yourself from that umbrella athlete identity, I think is a really cool opportunity. And I hadn't seen anybody else really do that on, a large scale. I mean, I've seen interviews, like videos on Flow or some, guys talking, just BSing around with them, but like you don't get like an inside look at what these guys do. And the person that I told him too, the person that really like was the reason that the idea for More Than the Mat was like birthed was Hunter Boland, because he fishes muskie competitively. He's starting his own fishing company, Smash Outdoors. Uh, and I think that's a really cool, I think it's really cool, but nobody knows about that. So,
Fishing
and
muskie competitively. Hold on one second.
mhm.
I gotta,
Yeah,
I gotta do some bad podcasting here. I gotta look this thing up.
yeah, I
Wait,
actually interviewed him yesterday, so, that episode should be coming out soon.
I see. I'm in Minnesota, so muskie's a thing here. Matter of fact, there was an old ABA team named the Minnesota Muskies. I have one of those like throwback shirts for them. So how does a kid from Floyd County end up fishing muskies? What I want to know is obviously you don't have
Yeah.
to share the entire chunks of that interview, but I am
Yeah.
curious on that question. What did you
Well
find out?
Floyd, Virginia is pretty rural, and there's a bunch of rivers and lakes around Montgomery County, so, the he's always on the water. If he's not in the wrestling room, he's on his boat fishing. So, I mean, he loves fishing, and I love talking to Bolin. He's a funny guy.
You
So,
know what? I just a Google search would have figured that one out. I'd never realized there were muskie in the New River.
yep.
Never realized that. I just figured,
Yeah.
I just thought it was a Minnesota lake fish.
Yeah.
Man, I'm learning something here. I haven't even listened to the show yet.
Yeah, no, so the episode should be coming out in a couple weeks, but just having guys be able to tell their story. I mean, I with people outside of wrestling, when I explain it to them, like I kind of use like football players, like Patrick Mahomes, for
Mhm.
example. Like, he all you know about Patrick Mahomes is that he's really good at throwing a football. You don't know what he does outside of football. Nobody does because nobody talks about it.
Well,
So
and his dad pitched it for many major league teams, including the
that
Minnesota
too.
Twins.
That too. Just so being able to have the opportunity of just sharing that side of these guys is really cool for me.
I gotta know this too from your perspective, because even at my age, I've been doing this for as long as I have. Is there ever a situation where you see something out there, you're like, ah, they got it before I did, or there's an idea or something comes out, and you're like, what the frick? I was just about to do, or it's just one of those things where clearly nobody's copying each other, but when the mindset are going the same place, and somebody gets, Ryan Warner's done this to me multiple times, not on purpose, but it's like, son of a, that was gonna be my next show. Or I was like, well, or I have to wait. Like, for example, in my case, I've like somebody else puts a show out, and I'm like, well, I'm going to have to wait a couple months to get this person now, because I don't want to do the same interview, a week after it's coming out on another show. So, what's it like to kind of do your planning and then have to actually be worried about what other people are putting out, or not be worried about what other people are putting out and just do your thing?
Well, I haven't run into that situation super bad yet. The closest thing that I've gotten to that was
You
I did
will.
a
Trust me,
yep,
you will.
I will eventually. I know that. The closest thing I've gotten to is I interviewed Carson Hartzla around January for one of the Patreon
Mhm.
video interviews. And I didn't even know Flow Wrestling had just interviewed him like the same week, and they released an interview with Hartzla like maybe like a day or two before mine. That was that was the closest thing I got to. I was like, oh, okay, they kind of beat me to the punch there. Uh, but I know it'll come eventually. I haven't grown enough journalistically to have that problem yet, I don't think. But hopefully, it seems like a good problem to have, and I hope to. I don't hope for it to happen, but it'll happen eventually.
A little tip too is don't take it personally
Oh yeah.
because as somebody, and I say this kind of half joking, half not, but a lot of my stuff's been copied. A lot of the things I've brought to the table have been taken, repurposed, reused. I don't patent those things. They weren't my ideas. I
Mhm.
just brought them into wrestling from my other experiences. And you can't, there is the one thing about being protective over content, protective over a space kind of thing. Realize that there's, again, to the point, like, I didn't know Fanco existed until he was already over 10,000 followers. Maybe it wasn't that
Mhm.
many, but it was like, wait, you can't get mad at something you don't know exists because it's
Yeah.
like, and that's also the proof there is just because somebody else does it doesn't mean, just because it's on Flow Wrestling doesn't mean everybody's already seen it, because I still find stuff that, like Bader, for example, the Bader show, that's got great information, but I don't always see it because it's not one thing they hype up as much as, say, I see FRL updates all the time. But at the same point, there's good stuff there, but that doesn't mean you can't do that interview either. Or the fan that's paying attention to Fanco and Stalemates isn't always paying attention to me or Flow or Blood Round, as I'm wearing a Blood Round shirt right now. There's so many wrestling fans out there that are still discovering content various ways. I
Mhm.
mean, I'm sitting there looking at TikTok. What is this? All these TikTok and Instagram accounts with hundreds of thousands of followers. I'm like, who are these people and why aren't
Yep.
they following me? Oh, wait, I'm the old boring guy. I'm the one who's going to educate you, not necessarily, steal a clip and get 10,000 follows on it.
Yeah.
I'm not referring to anybody specifically, by the way.
Of course. Yeah.
But yeah, so that's one thing. A little bit of advice is know that do your
Thank you.
thing. Don't worry about what everybody else is doing, even though
Mhm.
you're gonna worry about what everybody else is doing. It's like one of those
Uh-huh.
do what I say, not as I do things, because it drives me nuts sometimes where I've got a list of 200 people. I'm like, well, got to push them to the back, or even Blood Round. They're like, oh man, they got Tim Gaither again. Man, they got Jay Moore before I did. Jim Harshaw got Tim Ferriss before I did. And it's like, well, keep moving, keep hustling.
What do
So,
you do? I mean, if they beat you to the punch, they beat you to the punch.
well, it's not like we
Gotta
were in a
keep working.
race. It's just they didn't know I
Exactly.
was going after him. And so this is the thing: what you
Mhm.
don't know, what you don't know. But it's one thing is, now one thing I'm curious on your path here when you are setting up to do research on an interview, because I've done thousands of these. What is your process? What do you like to do to research before you have somebody on a show, or do you just kind of, all right, here's a little bit of what I have. For example, I didn't have a whole lot on you. I have a bio and an outdated, college major, which led to some people could look at, oh, you didn't do your research. No, that's what I had. So,
Yeah.
what's your policy or path on how you're going to do your research, and how different do you think that's going to be in 10 years?
Uh, so for me right now, I research what I can. Google's a really great tool. Just research whatever I can find. I
Back in my
usually
day,
only
son, we didn't have Google. No, go ahead.
so I just kind of, for me personally, I just kind of like write down, like I'll read up about them. I'll watch videos, stuff like that. And I'll write down whatever questions I have, just like whatever pops into my mind. And then later I'll reorganize it. And
Mhm.
like I have the angle in mind whenever I am coming into the research, but like then I'll reorganize everything so it fits the story that I'm trying to tell. 10 years from now, I have zero clue how that's going to work. Because I mean, all this stuff is still pretty new in the grand scheme of things. So we'll see how
Yeah,
that works out. But
10
right,
years ago, I was still working at USA Wrestling,
yeah, there you go.
and it was, I think, the podcast I had for them was one of two wrestling podcasts out there. So
Yeah.
we had a TV show called USA Wrestling Weekly, and the Matt.tv was putting out tons of video all the time. A lot can change in a decade. A lot can change in 2 years, let alone 10. So, Jake, I've
Definitely.
definitely been watching what you guys have been doing at Fanco. I think you and Josiah are going to make a great team with the mind you got there, and the way he looks at things differently than a traditional journalist would, and you're coming in
Mhm.
this with a journalistic mind, doing things that these your next generation of kids are doing. Because before, I didn't even have email when I first started working at a newspaper. That's how long that's been. So I'm curious in seeing what you guys are doing, and appreciate that putting the time and not giving up on your teammates at Virginia Tech and sitting there sticking it through, and putting in those hours, man. So that's one thing that made me want to do this show, and I'm glad to see you're gonna do some of this wrestling media stuff because just because there's people out there doesn't mean there can't be more people out there doing different things and providing a different view on things. So I'm very very interested in how you guys are going to continue moving this thing forward.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate you having me on. It's been great talking with you. I appreciate it.
Last word. So when you're finishing up with Blacksburg, you got your 2 classes left. What's it gonna be like for you to not go into wrestling practice for the first time? Be like, "Ah, I don't have to get beat up anymore. I
Oh,
don't
I've
have to
already been
make
dealing
I
with
don't have
that.
to make weight anymore."
I've already been dealing with that. It's like you kind of have like people that don't wrestle, like haven't wrestled as long as I have, or haven't been through the ringer in whatever sport that they do. Uh it's like almost like an identity crisis almost. Like I've been doing the same thing every single day since I was 6 years old, and all of a sudden I'm not. So you kind of just have to learn, like you have to teach yourself how to function without it. And it was tough. It still is a little tough, obviously I miss wrestling, but uh just it's weird. It's really weird not, wrestling every day and going in there and, getting beat up all the time. It's nice not being sore all the time and, being exhausted and, 2:30 in the afternoon. Oh, I can go take a nap. I don't have to go to practice. It's kind of nice. There's pros and cons to it, but, I'll get used to it eventually.
All right, Jake, how can we follow you on social media? Where can people in Hokie Nation keep up with what you're doing, following your life as a Hokie?
You can follow me on Instagram, Twitter. My Instagram's Jake Hart TX. My Twitter is Jakey_Jake. And then obviously check out More Than the Mat on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Subscribe to the Patreon to get the video format and a bunch of other good bonus stuff from Fanco Wrestling. Make sure to subscribe to Fanco on YouTube for more wrestling news. And that's all that comes to my mind right now. So, yeah.
That's all I got for you too. So I actually, one last word. One last word. If there was one thing you could tell Hokie Nation about Tony Roby from a coaching athlete relationship, what would it be?
Tony Roby he'll tell you like it is, and he means it with no disrespect. He means it because he cares about you and your progression. And he's just going to be honest with you. And honestly, that's the one thing, the biggest thing I appreciate about Coach Roby is that he won't sugarcoat things. And to quote Tom Brands in his documentary they did after the Penn State Iowa duel, I forget the name of it, but we don't have time to sugarcoat stuff. That's what he said. So he's he knows what he's looking for, and he expects you to live up to that expectation, and he's just going to be honest with you. And I think that I admire that.
I think he's going to have to be honest with himself too, that he's going to be jealous of your hair. That's what we got. So Jake, appreciate the time, man, and good luck with the rest of the thing. And like I said, for you guys, just don't be afraid to reach out if you need anything, because here for Hokie Nation, here for what you guys got.
Well, thank you for having me on.